Coming up, long-term Hornet review from artillery. We'll see how it goes. Hey everybody, Chris Sargent Taz here, and today I'm going to talk about the Hornet. Over here. So, I've been running this for, maybe 6 months, I want to say, continuously, to see how it worked. I didn't want to do a review on it up until I actually used it in a lot of my processes and made sure it worked. So, today I'm going to go over some of the things that are good, some of the things that are bad with it. So, let's get into it. Let's get off with the good. To start out, it's a reasonably priced printer, and it actually works really well. The sleek design with the one cable running from it, you don't have wires everywhere. It's a nice little setup. Works really well. I've had good prints. I've had good adhesion from the bed. It's got a 32-bit board. I haven't messed with the firmware on it at all. I've been running it completely stock, aside from my previous video where I did the Bowden tube upgrade, because I felt that the cheap PTFE tube running through there was kind of like, giving me a little bit of stringing issues, I think, and the diameter of the tube on the cheap stuff isn't that great. So I was getting slack every now and again when I was doing retractions. You have to keep in mind, it's a Bowden style, so it's not the same as the Genius or the X1, so you're going to have to play with the retraction settings. I found that around 2 to 3 millimeters is about the sweet spot of it. So 2 to 3, so 2.5 would be in the middle of the road. If that, anything higher just tends to clog and jam that hot end, which is a real pain in the butt to fix. So let's take a look at the hot end. What we have here is an all-in-one type with the cable chain. So it really isn't an all-metal hot end. It looks like it is, but it isn't. There's actually some little PTFE just above the actual nozzle inside the block. You gotta be mindful of that. If you want to do anything high temp, it's probably not a good idea to use that. You probably want to get an all-metal heat break and change it the way it's set up in the block, because it just is not going to perform well after a while. It's going to melt inside that little small zone that's in there, as you can see from the pics. Overall, though, it prints well. It is a little bit finicky to try and load or unload filament, so it has the Titan style extruder gear, but it's inverted. So trying to get it up in there sometimes can be a real pain in the butt. If you do get a clog, it can be miserable because of the one-piece design, because you can't keep it heated and actually get a good grip on some of the filament sometimes, because it's going through the long Bowden tube. You might get lucky and be able to snatch it out, but if it breaks inside there anywhere, you're going to have to take it apart. So what I normally wind up doing, when I get them, they're not that often because I get the retraction fixed now, so it's not jumping above and getting stuck. But when I didn't have the retraction fixed, it would get jammed. So what I'd have to either do is either turning it on, heating it up about maybe 20 or 30 C above what I normally would use it, the filament I'm using it at, and then quickly unscrew, pop off, and then pull. Because cold pulls are not going to be a good idea on this machine. You got to realize that you're going to have the nozzle, a little bit of PTFE tubing, the heat break, and doing cold pulls in through there, you're going to damage that little small piece in there, and eventually it's just going to get out around and start causing you all kinds of grief you don't want. So I recommend just trying to get a hot pull and get it out. So usually push down first and then pull, but having to heat it up without being connected the whole time, you're going to get cool down factor. So I either do it that way really fast and unscrew and then pull it out, or what I wind up doing is taking the whole hot end off, which is only a couple of bolts. It all comes off, and I'll bench vise it, and then use this guy here to heat up the block, and then I'll clear it out. It hasn't happened that often since I've changed my retraction settings. Like I said, I use 2 on mine, and I've gotten great results. This is actually one of the prints, transparent filament. It's kind of bright in here, sorry, but this was no supports, and I got very minimal stringing on this, and it turned out really well. So it was all in one go, and this is the quality you're going to get from it if you use it right. Like I said, the drawback is not being able to do a cold pull or even try and get a heated pull out sometimes, because you can't undo the cable without it turning off into a min temp area, because you can't keep heat going to it. So I usually just take the whole hot end off. It's the easiest way, and then just try and bench vise it and heat it up and get it out. Like I said, hasn't happened that often. I've probably ran about maybe 1,000 prints through this machine, and it's a workhorse. But the drawback, like I said, is the single point for all the wiring. Yeah, it's kind of a pain if you get a problem, but overall, as long as you're operating and it's running good, it's not that big of a deal. That's the only problem I really have with the machine. Other than that, it's continuously worked fine. I can't complain. I mean, for the price point and what it is, it runs really well. I mean, you got a 32-bit board, and it actually works really well. So I don't know what else I could say about it more than that. It just gets the job done. It's not a direct drive, so those are disadvantages and advantages depending on what you're doing and with printing. For a first-time user, they're not going to be more or less knowledgeable about the other ways of doing it. So it might be better if you were a first-time user purchasing this, because you're not going to have the preconceived notions of like an Ender or the X1 or the Genius. If you get used to using certain things, you kind of get things in your mind and get stuck with repetition and doing it all the time. So then when they invert the extruder, you're like, okay. I've heard a couple of them suffered from the tension lever problem again, but I find that I don't use the actual thumb portion of the tension lever. What happens is because of the way the Titan and Titan clones are on the plastic, when you put that kind of stress on them, so I never use the thumb portion of the tension. I never use this lever because it does this kind of stuff. It breaks it. What you want to use is right here, the solid portion, and push if you're ever going to manually use it. So obviously it's going to be inverted on a Hornet, so you'll push it this way instead of pushing here, because this is going to put leverage on that little piece and it's going to snap no matter what you do. If you put it here, you're not creating a fulcrum point to where it'll snap. So that's how I use the tension lever. I usually just use the actual feed functions from the menu screen. So what you'll do is load filament, it'll walk you through it, and I'll just push it through the tube as it's going, and it should feed perfectly fine. I haven't had an issue with it actually getting caught or snagged anywhere, especially since I changed the tubing to Capricorn. It's worked a heck of a lot better in my opinion, and it was a really easy swap. Just match the length and run it through, and you're done. Overall, though, I think it's a pretty solid printer. I mean, if I was going to do multiples for a farm, it'd be ideal. I kind of got my own little mini farm going with X1s, a Genius, and this guy, and then my 2 Enders. So, I mean, I do have a background with running them constantly, and this guy actually keeps up with the group. So I can do my smaller prints on the Hornet and get them done, and move on to the next project. I don't have to, spool up the bigger printers. So that's an advantage for me. I did put a PEI sheet on it. It just makes it easier for leveling and print removal. Eventually, I might go to a flex plate. I got them on the X1s and my Ender 5. I like the flex plates. It makes it a little more convenient when you're doing multiple prints. For a job that you need to do a swap, I can just swap out a plate, which is nice. But overall, the bed is fine. I just, like I said, put PEI sheet on it, so I'm not later on down the line having to worry about losing the adhesion. Anyways, overall, I think it's a pretty solid printer. Well worth the price if you can get it reasonable. I picked mine up from Amazon for $200. It was on sale. So I couldn't really beat the price on it. I didn't think it was bad. 32-bit. I run Octoprint on it. I don't have to mess with it. I mean, it's really simple. It does have a nice big SD card versus a small micro one, so you get a full-size SD card for input. No USB. Don't know why, other than it probably costs more. But like I said, it works really well. I mean, obviously there's a USB-B port, so you can use Octoprint, but there's no USB stick option to do your prints. It's just a large SD card versus the micro ones that always seem to get lost or flipped around somewhere. So it's a bigger SD card, which works nice. You can use that with the adapter if you have small SD cards. They have the full-size adapter. That works with it fine. I haven't had an issue. But overall, it's been a good experience with the printer, and I would recommend it to somebody starting out. It isn't a bad deal. And you're not dealing with a bunch of wires all over the printer, so it's a very clean printer, obviously. Let's see if I can get it into shot. I mean, the side spool is nice, so now it fits under the shelf with the side spool. Obviously, the spool is off of it, but when I'm running it, it doesn't get in the way of anything, which is really good. So if you got any questions, leave them below. Other than that, I appreciate you guys watching. As always, like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it, and see ya.